All right, let's get into this discussion now. Police have confirmed that 300 more public order police have been sent to parts of KwaZulu-Natal. This is to ensure stability following elections, which the MK party claims are rigged without providing proof. Let's speak now to political analyst Mpumelelo Phungula, and alongside him is University of KwaZulu-Natal criminology lecturer, Professor Nirmala Devi Gopal. To both of you, thank you very much for making time for this conversation. Can I begin with you, Mr. Phungula, and just ask you to paint a picture of what you think is going on here? We've mentioned police reinforcements that have been sent to KwaZulu-Natal. The National Police Commissioner was in the media yesterday saying that they have intelligence that there are things that are being planned, but of course they cannot expand on what it is that they know exactly, because that would constitute operational detail that they would be revealing to the media. But you add to that, there is a murder today that has occurred in the area of Katomena. That, all of these factors combined, what does it tell us about what is possibly going on in KZN?
Thank you for the opportunity, Toli. I'm really sad to learn that we've lost a life, and it appears that it's linked to political violence from what you've just explained. Now, the province of KwaZulu-Natal has a history of political violence. It dates back to the apartheid era and in the early 1990s. I think there were conflicts between the African National Congress and the Inkatha Freedom Party, and they were very, very violent back then. There wasn't really any serious measures by the government to try and post-democracy, to try and bring together the people of KZN who were separated or divided by the conflicts between the ANC and the IFP. Closer to his death or passing on, the late leader of the IFP, Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, tried on several occasions, I think, to ask for the ANC leadership for them to have a sit down and try and resolve the differences that were there. Not sure how that ended, but I know that there's still a need for some form of peace building between the two sections, because yes, we did have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but those measures didn't really take away the pain of the past, and in fact, they almost exacerbated or made the situation worse, because people felt unheard. People felt that there was no justice for what happened. Now, because of that, Oli, we now find ourselves where we are. I think because the ANC has been the majority party in most provinces since 1994, and also nationally, I think they need to shoulder some of the blame for the failure to address apartheid spatial planning, where we still have, in large part, a scenario where KwaZulu-Natal is known as the land of the Zulus, Eastern Cape is known as the land of the Xhosas, Limpopo, Vendors and Pedis, Free State, the Sothos, and so on.
Yeah.
So that has not helped our nation building process. And what is unique in KZN, what is more unique in KZN, because like I've noticed that in social media there have been murmurs that the people of KZN, particularly the Zulus, think they're special, is that there is something special about KZN in the context of South Africa. KZN is the only province where you had people fighting other Black people and were killing each other, and sometimes people who are family members. They are still, to this day, family members who do not speak to one another because of that violence. of that time. So it's not just family members, but neighbor on neighbor and so on. That conflict, only what is not said is that during those times, because the IFP at that time had dominance in KwaZulu-Natal, you had a situation where you found people from other provinces, especially from the Eastern Cape, who were strong ANC members coming into KZN and assisting their ANC comrades in the fight against the IFP side. So it's really quite unfortunate, Oli, that post the results that we have experienced, that a senior leader of the African National Congress, the chairperson, Mr. Gwede Mantashe, would, before the results are even announced, would attribute the vote away, like people voting against the ANC, to tribalism. Like I said, in KZN, there's ANC, mostly the leadership are Zulu people. There's also IFP. The leadership is also Zulu people. And in the context that I've just painted, you had Xhosa people who came to fight alongside Zulu people against other Zulu people. So to reduce anything that has to do with KZN to tribalism is a bit unfortunate and dangerous, because leading to the election, you also have a party called ABC, led by one Mr. P.G. Mavundla, I think his first name is Pilani. He actually campaigned around the idea that Zulus, especially in the ANC, are being marginalized, and that his party will actually prioritize Zulus. And if he gains like the votes that he needs, he will pursue a situation whereby KZN can become a standalone province, much like what you heard come from Cape Town, where there's a section of people who are feeling like there needs to be a Cape independence or Western Cape independence from the rest of the country. So I think when we discuss these sort of issues, Oli, we need to exercise a lot of caution, given that from the apartheid era, not much that's material was done to facilitate peace building and create healing amongst the people who were involved in conflict. Because, like I said, conflict here in KZN was not only in the context of the apartheid era, it was not only against the racist apartheid government, but also specifically for ANC people, it was a fight against IFP people. Right. I'll stop there for now, Toli. And of course, let me just lastly add that there are certainly issues following the press up by President Zuma, where after feeling aggrieved, together with 20 odd other parties, following the IEC results, where he said he feels like there were irregularities that were substantial, and that he's not alone in this, and that he feels like the IEC trying to rush when there's actually 7 days that the IEC has before they can actually to announce the election results. He doesn't see what's the need to rush and announce the elections when they feel they have quite a lot of evidence, not alone, but together with the other parties, that they believed 24 hours wasn't sufficient to actually address those issues. Okay. So yeah, I'll stop there for now.
All right. Professor Gopal, let's come to you. But before I do that, I just need to caution, particularly around the death that we have spoken about in Cato Manor today, just to say that police have not yet told us what the motive for that killing was. I just think that it is a responsible thing to do. Let's come to you then, Professor Gopal. So there are a number of issues that seem to be bubbling under the police deployments, then the statements by political leaders or political party leaders such as those of Gwede Mantashe. How do you see the situation in KZN? Frame it for us.
So first of all, good evening, and of course my condolences to the family where the death has occurred. whether it's politically aligned or not. Yeah, I think my peer has mentioned a whole lot of issues around why he believes that the violence had occurred in the past and why it could be occurring currently, etc. So I think, yes, if we contextualize the whole the issue of so-called or predicted violence at the moment, we know that it's created around the elections, the most recent elections. But having said that, Koli, I think there's a possibility that we are creating hype that could not necessarily be there. So that's one school of thought. And I say that because, from the ground, there haven't been, except for the few social media messages, which have turned out to be mostly fake, there hasn't been much conversations or concerns from the people on the ground in terms of predicted violence in the country anytime soon, or immediate or in the near future. However, having said that, the fact that we have POP, public order policing, that has been deployed in KwaZulu-Natal, and I think the extended period, of course, I think by now we all know that it was part of the election plan of SAPS. And we also know that that was based on the fact that there was some turbulence in KZN, largely because of the growth or development of the MK party.
Yeah.
And I think what people were associating the rise of MK or the existence of MK was they were associating that with the 2021 Durban riots. And out of that emerged a fear and a worry that something similar could transpire.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have public order policing that continues to exist in certain areas in KwaZulu-Natal, I think it's a good thing, because it's what we would call proactive policing. If we didn't have that, then we would complain against the police. So the fact that they are being proactive, I think is a good thing. It's good assurance for the citizens of KwaZulu-Natal, because we also know that visible policing is one of the most effective ways to deter crime and violence. So that's possibly one of the reasons why we're not seeing the kind of violence that we anticipated for this particular point in time.
Yeah.
I also have recently heard of those social media messages that are fake, and the concern from the Phoenix Peace Coalition. Yes. And I would believe that it's justified. Their worry is justified, and the fact that they have reached out to SAPS as well is justified in the name of protecting the citizens of South Africa.
Yeah.
I want to quickly zoom into, Koli, if it's okay, I want to zoom into the whole issue of violence and speak about violence in terms of how I see the relationship between violence and power. So, usually violence emerges as a consequence of individuals wanting to have power, be it structure, be it economic, socioeconomic, political, etc. And I think that when we think about KZN and the fact that the issues around power and violence is because we're competing, we're in competition, and when there isn't enough to go around, then that conflict can result in violence. So at this point in time, and given the previous rounds of violence that we had between political parties, it was because we had one political party in power, or in so-called power, versus another political party.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it's part of human behavior. Although we know that genetically, we cannot say that isiZulu-speaking people are more violent than isiXhosa-speaking people, etc. That doesn't exist. We know that there are no genes that predispose people to violence. However, the concern is how we socialize in KZN, in the country at large.
You've both made such good inputs here. I'm going to urge you to be quite brief in your next statements or contributions because of time constraints. Let's then come back to the question around the responsibilities of political leaders and what they say when they can tell that the situation is possibly tense and could get out of hand. In fact, talking about that, former President Jacob Zuma addressing the supporters of the MK party a little earlier this week on the back of that court case where Jabulani Khumalo is fighting to get back into the leadership post within the MK. He had a few words to say, basically talking to people to say that they should not use violence to solve anything. I just want us to listen to him for a moment and we'll pick up after that.
Asiliyeke nje ulaka sizodila nabo kahle kuze kufike ekugcineni. Thatha inqomo ukuthi namhlanje sibafaka icala siyabamangalela. And uma ngoba sibakhuzile bangakhuzeka uma beye eParliament sibaningi kabi umkhonto wesizwe. Yebo baba. Singase sidube ukuya eParliament. Singase sidube ukuya eParliament. Akekho kuyothatha itulo zethu lapha. Yithe siye eParliament. Yebo. Kodwa asifuni ukuya singaphelele ngoba sirojiwe.
Mr. Phungula, that's the former President Jacob Zuma there, basically calming the waters to say, do not be tempted to use violence. If anything, we're going to deal with them using either the court systems or through Parliament. Do you think that his statements much more restrained this time around versus what he said at the media briefing during the, well, on the eve of the results announcements?
Yes, definitely, Paulie. These statements are much more responsible, and it's what can be expected from a former president. I'd say those statements were presidential, but also we cannot downplay that or might have listened partially to what the president said immediately in his presser after the into the election room to actually make the presser where he actually laid a complaint to say he felt there were discrepancies, and he did it, like I said earlier, with other parties. I think there are some people who listen selectively and who are perhaps aggrieved by the institutions in South Africa, would have heard or took the part where he says people might go wild.
All right, I think Mr. Phungula is frozen there. It is an opportunity to come to you, Professor Gopal, and let's then get your thoughts, particularly around the responsibility of leaders and what they say.
Absolutely. I think, the fact that he has, ex-President Zuma has what should I say, has tempered the way in which he is communicating. I think that's an absolute positive, and we must give him credit for that. The fact that we, these are leaders and they're, citizens of the particular area, etc., look up to them and see them as role models is just so important, that they behave in a way that's befitting of leadership. In addition to that, I think, whilst having said that, and the fact that he says we will do it through courts and through Parliament, the courts, I think, is an excellent vehicle through which you can resolve conflicts and disputes, etc. I just really hope that in Parliament it's not used, that space is not used to stymie important discussions for the people of the country.
Mr. Phungula, you're back now, and you perhaps wanted to finish your thought, but as you conclude your initial thoughts, I want to then move the conversation forward and perhaps talk about law enforcement and the proactive steps that they seem to be taking. That's a positive, is it not?
Certainly a positive, Cody. We will know that the last time around in July 2021, they were caught napping. And what is unfortunate, Cody, especially around the now former ruling party, is that in most mature democracies, if something like that happens, people who are leading in the security cluster would be expected to resign immediately. But it did not happen in our country. And as we know, the Secretary General of the ANC, after formed the MK party, he came out to actually say the ANC used its parliamentary majority to suppress or to shield the president from responsibility during that time. Yeah. So I think taking from that, Cody, what we see now with the proactive steps that are being taken by the security cluster, that can be commended, because the province has still not recovered from what happened back then, and people in the minds of the people, especially following Gwede Mantashe's statement this time around, as I said earlier, and what the president himself, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, said, attributing that violence to ethnic mobilization. Only we are in seriously dangerous territory, because the people, or here in KZN mostly, when you listen to the voice notes, when you listen to people on the street, when you even listen sometimes when people sing in ANC circles, sing Wenzenu Zuma, a lot of people interpret that like I've been like trying to engage with people on the ground and actually pointing out the president's misdemeanors. The responses you usually find are along the lines of Mamba Tabile Dlamini, the former ANC Youth League, ANC Women's League president, did say that all of them have smaller skeletons. So now the thing is, the word on the ground, a space where the former president Zuma is very strong, especially in KZN, is that the former president is being targeted. People feel that the institutions treated Mr. Ramaphosa, the president, Mr. Ramaphosa, favorably around Phala. Some of them point out to questions that were raised around his statement back during the Marikana massacre, quote unquote, where he was said to have said something along the lines of calling for concomitant action that was investigated. He was found clean. All of those things do not only cast doubt or break trust issues between people and the leadership, but also the institutions, because we know, Koli, that leaders, especially those who are in political power, do, like especially the president, who has like very serious powers, has the power to install quite a lot of people in position who are in charge of institutions that should be ensuring that everyone is treated fairly. Sure. In a democracy. So we need not downplay that, Crowley. We need not downplay the whole issue of people feeling like our government failing us, our institutions are failing us, and therefore maybe let us vote out whoever was the government at the time where failures were experienced.
Yeah. Professor Gopal, I want you to just keep in your mind, I want to take a break now, but when we return from the break, I want to discuss with you a statement that was made by Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana on this show a little earlier this week, who says we should not shy away from calling out tribalism if and when we see it, because we know the consequences of it, and if we don't call it for what it is, then perhaps we are not helping this situation. I'd like for you to gather your thoughts around that, but we're going to take a short break. When we return, we wrap up this discussion. And we are wrapping up a discussion around fears of possible violence that could erupt in KwaZulu-Natal, given the elections that have just come and gone, the police deciding that they are going to deploy before they let anything to chance, and they are very clear that their intelligence has picked up that there could be the organizing of some kind of bad behavior, and therefore that is why they have sent some public order policing for reinforcements. Joining me for this conversation, we're still with political analyst Mpumelelo Phungula and the University of KwaZulu-Natal's criminology lecturer, Professor Nirmala Devi Gopal. Professor Gopal, let's come back to you. Knowing what we know today, the consequences of ethnic violence that we saw in the early 90s, and I dare say that the leader of the IFP, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, wanting almost to make a public gesture of extending his hand to the ANC for what occurred many years ago, that moment, yes, we might not have had it because he's gone now, but surely as a country, we should have a memory of how terrible that was. Do you think that people today could still be yearning for anything of that sort? And I'm saying this on the back of what Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana is saying, and that is that tribalism or ethnic mobilization, we need to call it for what it is, because failure to do that will have serious consequences for all of us. Is he right?
Yeah, well, I would agree that, it's important to call out any kind of ism, whether it's tribalism, sexism, racism, etc. I think it's absolutely critical. And I think South Africa has arrived at a space where we can have these open discussions and hold people and institutions, etc., accountable. So I think it's beautiful. And the fact that we've also changed the way in which our voters have started voting, in a sense, tells us that the time for change has arrived. In terms of, what the late Dr. Buthelezi had offered at that particular point in time, I think that was really a great opportunity that we might have missed. However, having said that, Xoli, I think what is important for all of us is to really get to the cause of the violence. Is it really about tribalism? Is it really about sexism? Is it really about racism? Or are there other issues that are at play? Because if we misdiagnose, then the probability of us ever resolving violence is going to become impossible. Wow. So it's important to get to the real cause. Yeah. I mean, I don't believe that tribalism, can people fight because, or how do we prove that it's loyalty to a particular tribe that's causing the conflict? There has to be some other underlying issues, probably coupled with the issue of loyalty to a tribe, for example.
Yeah, or it could be loyalty to an individual. It's so poignant what Professor Gopal is saying, Mr. Phungula, and very briefly, if you can, because it takes us back to the conclusions of the investigations around what caused the July unrest. And that report, while all of us were convinced that in the main it had to do with former President Jacob Zuma being arrested, while that may have been the trigger, but socio-economic issues were front and center of that. And that's what that report in big part does say, that people on the ground, some of them in particular young people, unemployed, that played a very huge role, because you saw people looting stores, all because they possibly did not have food to eat.
True, Polly. I agree with Professor Mlechane insofar as I feel it is necessary for us not to sweep under the carpet like the effects of our history in
All right. No,
present day.
the connection to Mr. Phungula completely losing us. Professor Gopal, any last few words perhaps before we wrap it up?
So my last thoughts are that I really pray and hope that we don't have any violence because we cannot afford that. We just had a violent storm and people are reeling from that in KZN. So we really need to start rebuilding our province. Whichever parties are in power, we need to work together and ensure that, or try to become the best province in the country.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and contribution to this discussion. Professor Nirmala Devi Gopal is with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, a criminology lecturer there.